Excellent, beautiful. So I actually do have an intro slide, but obviously Teresa did it all. You can find me on LinkedIn and Twitter. The piece that was missing, I also work for GP Strategies. I'm the Director of Learning Experience Design for GP Canada and oversee all the design and development work we're doing over there. So I want to dive right in, and I will be keeping walking around, so I hope you won't get dizzy, but trying to work the room. So a full 90% of organizations actually do not have all the skills they need to be successful. It's a little scary if you think about that. And we actually, when we look at some of the Deloitte Global Human Capital Trends report, that was from last year, 2019, we can actually see that more organizations are willing to invest in training. So I think that's pretty good news for us, isn't it? So I think we won't be out of a job anytime soon. And 84% will actually increase investment in reskilling. And we also have about 53% of the organizations that we're surveyed that say there is actually a budget increase. It's not very much of a budget increase, really, but I guess it's better than nothing. And we actually also will see a 77% increase in headcount, making L&D the second fastest growing role in HR. So I'd say good news all around, isn't it? Don't want to bore you with a whole bunch of stats and kind of come back to reality, because we kind of got to change the way we work and the way we think. I sometimes do step on people's toes. I apologize in advance. But there's a lot of good stuff we're doing, but like I said, there's a lot of stuff we have to definitely change and think differently about. And one of the things I often still see is that when clients come to us, we think about training as that one-time event. But it shouldn't be a one-time event. It should really be a journey. It should be an experience that we need to look at. The other thing that really baffles me all the time is actually that we think of content and training like the same thing. But actually, content is part of the training. So we have all these different content pieces that go into training. And after training, we always say, oh, was it good or bad? But we only look at the training. We don't really look at the content. So those are a couple of things that I think we really have to change our mindset a little bit and think differently about it. So the way I like to think about this is the 3 Ps, predictive, proactive, and personal, which is really all about the learner needs. It's about the learner experience, and it's about the training design. So when we think about the learner needs and the proactive piece, it's all about data. And now I feel really bad about, after that keynote, because yeah, it's all, of course, about the data, but it's also about the person behind the data. So I'm kind of happy I'm also thinking about the learner experience and, ways of looking at our target audience a little bit differently, leveraging learner personas, the marketing funnel, which kind of tightly connected to the learner journey, and of course the content strategy piece. And then the last piece is really the training design, which is where you make it personal, where you bring it all together in learning campaigns. And that's kind of the framework I want to walk you through today, leveraging marketing techniques to really up and reskill your workforce. So it's just a different way of looking at things and the way we're doing them right now. So we can actually leverage marketing to create really, really engaging content that's ruthlessly relevant. Thanks, Matt, for that term. I love using that. He already chuckles over there. And really, tackle that skill gap that we currently see in our organizations. So what I want to do, we have 70 minutes. I was already saying, this is great. You usually get an hour, and you're always missing 10 minutes. So I'm very happy we have 70 minutes together. They will be packed. There will be some, me presenting, and then I want you to also talk in your table group. So we'll try to make it as interactive as possible. If you have questions, comments, if you're like, Bianca, what are you talking about? Interrupt me, challenge me. But we're going to talk about going beyond the target audience analysis, so really empathizing with our learners, looking at learner personas. We're going to envision the learner journey, leveraging the marketing funnel. Then we're going to talk about content strategy, so how do you map content to the journey and to the learner personas. And then again, bringing it all together in learner campaigns. Sounds like a plan? Yes. Excellent. All right. So we have to make a couple of assumptions on how we got here, because obviously there's a whole bunch of work that happened before that. So we did something along the lines of, some kind of an intake process. We did some kind of a analysis and recommendation. We're kind of in this stage right now where we're really looking at, okay, what are some of the activities we can envision for our learners? What are some of the tasks, some of the skills? What is it really that we're envisioning, right? So that's kind of where we're at. So first, obviously, in order to identify the skills that are needed, we kind of have to identify the skills themselves first through, for example, very simple job description. So you really just go in and see, what do I have right now? And of course, data and observation. So again, I'm glad I put observation on here, right? It's like talking, not just leveraging the data. So really, really, small, simple starting point. And it kind of gives you a matrix. I know, disclaimer, this is kind of a oversimplification of things. But I really want you to start thinking differently. An Excel spreadsheet is not the worst place to get started, okay? So basically all you would do is kind of list your skills and say, okay, this is what we have. Here are the different roles. Here's what's available. Here's what's needed. Obviously, as you can imagine, this could get out of hand quite quickly. But again, it's just to get you thinking differently. Fair? So start with that. And then you can already see there's certain sections. And I'm not using my pointer, I used that yesterday, and then everything just went black. So in the middle, where you see skill B, it actually says, for role A, there's no skill available, but it's also not needed. So I don't even have to worry about that. If you look over at skill C there's actually a skill needed for role A, but it's only available in role B. So I should certainly also think about cross-training and look at different departments. I think that's something we often overlook, that we just look within our departments and say, oh, we don't have the skills, that's too bad. But actually, if you talk to a different department, you might be able to find what you need over there. Or it might be quicker to upskill someone in a different department because they're already 80% there, right? Something to consider. All right, so once you kind of have that basis on, here's what I need, here's what I'm looking for, how do you go about that actual reskilling experience? How do you create that learner journey, that learner experience that really makes a difference? I'm sure a lot of you guys also know about design thinking. Yes? So this is kind of where this comes from as well, is the learner persona, empathizing with your learner. And we all know we need to create more personalized training. We heard it this morning, right? We all want our stuff to be very individualized to ourselves, be very special for ourselves. And as hard as it is, and I mean, it's already hard enough, let's put it that way, to create training with the small budgets that we have. And now we're being tasked to create different programs for different people. So we have to find a bit of a shortcut and say, hey, how can we generalize it a little bit? How can we get there to still move towards a more personalized approach, but still be cost effective in what we're doing? So you would start first, before you go into learner personas, you actually start with learner segments. So the segment is really the bigger piece. It's groups of, for example, in this case, a new employee. And then what you would do, you would actually think about, what do I know about these people, and what don't I know? And I did a workshop yesterday, and we did this exercise, and it was quite interesting, because people after, as we were debriefing, they were saying, I'm actually assuming a lot of things. But as I started to think about what I know and what I don't know, I realized I don't know a lot of things about my learners, which is, of course, super scary. But that's also a really great starting point to actually then build out your learner personas, because now you have starting points to talk to your learners as well, to have interview questions, to have survey questions, to say, hey, what about this, what about that? It goes back to what we heard this morning. It's not just about data. There's a person behind that data set that's out there. So going through this exercise, it's not even super important to say, oh, in the end, here are the 15 different segments I have. For me, this is more the starting point, again, for these learner personas, so I can ask the right questions. And also, as you start working with learner segments and learner personas, it's a living, breathing thing. It changes. It doesn't have to be written in stone. Right? So you do that first, and then from there, you actually start building out your persona. So persona I keep on using the word, and some of you might not even know what I'm talking about. So persona is a fictitious character that you create that represents your ideal learner, something marketing has done for years. Ideally, you want to create 3 to 5, because if you create more, it's really quite difficult to then, stay on top of things. That's really what it comes down to. And a learner persona is really something you give that person a name and a personality, and it has certain ways of how they learn and what motivates them and whatnot. But it really helps you empathize. It really helps you think like the learner would think. And this way, you can actually create training programs or learner journeys that are much more tailored towards what that person is looking for. And some of the questions you want to ask when you create a persona is, what do they think and feel? For me, that's the most important one. It's funny, when you do a regular traditional target audience analysis, it's often like, okay, this is their role, and they're whatever age, and they have been with us for whatever many years. Okay, great, next. That's definitely not enough information. We don't even consider thinking about what they think and what they feel. So that emotional aspect of a learner persona, for me, is the most important one. It's almost like, oh my gosh, we can't talk about what they feel. I don't know, are they going to explode or something? I don't know. But so really think and feel. What is it that they think and feel? What is it that they see? What do they see when they come to work every day? What do they see when they actually go through one of your learning solutions? What do they hear? So it could really be like, are they listening to music while they work? But also, when they go to the kitchen to grab a cup of coffee, what do they hear that other people say about the organization, about your training solutions, about how awesome your LMS is, right? The 20 clicks it takes to actually get there. What do they do? So when they come to work, what do? They walk by the security desk, then they go to their desk, then what is it that they do? Also, what do they do when they access your training? What are their pains? What are their wins? So all of a sudden, when you start looking at it this way, you really start thinking like that person, and you see the world a little different. So this is just an example of emotional intelligence training and how a learner persona for emotional intelligence training could look. You don't have to do them for a specific training initiative or learning initiative. You could do it, just a generic learner persona. When you Google them, there's like 1,000,002 different templates out there. So you don't have to use this one. You can use, whatever makes sense for your organization. You can ask different questions, but it's just a starting point. And it's different. It's different for all of you because you have different interests and different things you're looking for. And here's some of the questions you could ask. So especially the top part is really, the demographics you get from your HR department often. But you also talk about, their interests and their motivations. And why is that important? Why do I care what they do outside of work? I care because this way I'll be able to find what's relevant for them. And the relevancy piece is really the key to everything we do. Because if we don't find the thing that's important for the learner, why do they even care? Why would they even take our learning solutions? And now you're saying, Bianca, they have to take them anyway. What do I care? Well, let's make the world a better place and make it a little bit more enjoyable for those learning solutions that are compliant training, but all the other solutions that we can put out there to really make the world a better place. Leveraging learner personas can make a real difference to what you're doing. So what you would do once you have your learner persona, you kind of go back to your matrix and say, okay, now that I've done my learner personas, there are 2, 3, whatever, and then you can kind of put the people that you have and the skills that you have roughly into those groups. Little disclaimer here, and I get that question often. It's like, yeah, Bianca, sounds great. But I won't be able to get all of my learners. I won't be able to create a personalized program for you and you and you and you. No, you won't. But a learner persona or learner personas gets you closer to where you need to be to really understand who your learners are. And you'll actually, yes, you group them, and some people won't really fit in one category or the other, but again, it's still closer to an ideal state than you've ever been. When you do this in real life, it can take 3 to 6 months to actually do this. I know, quite interesting. I mean, you can do them quickly, don't get me wrong. You can do them in a day workshop, and you have something to work with. But it's really important to have the right stakeholders in the room. It's really important to run this by the learner at some point and say, can you see yourself in this? It's really important that, that you get some data as well to back up what you're doing. It's important to do interviews and observations. So obviously, if you don't do all of this, if you only do the brainstorming, learner personas, again, you can do it pretty quick. But if you're doing it in depth, it can be 3 to 6 months. Okay? All right, so what I would like you to do now for the next 2 minutes, 2 to 3 minutes, is just in your groups, imagine that the skill we want to focus on to up and reskill is to collaborate more effectively with one another. I think it's one of those skills that everyone is facing is like, oh yeah, I don't know if it is because we're all on our phones all the time and people don't talk to one another anymore. I have a feeling that has something to do with it. But let's focus on that. And I would like you to just brainstorm a little bit, what could a learner persona look like for this training program? Just pick an organization, pick an industry, just kind of start thinking through what that might look like. And I'm going to put up this slide again, so that'll help you. So it'll take about 2 to 3 minutes in your table groups. All right? All right, everyone. This is always the hardest part in these sessions, to interrupt the beautiful conversations that are going on. And I really hate doing that, but if you could just finish your last thought and then bring it back to the front, that'd be great. Thank you. I love it. It's like it just keeps on going. I need someone to whistle or something. Should bring a bell next time. All right, everyone, if you could just bring it back to the front of the room. Hello, hello. Thank you. Thank you. All right. I was just saying, I don't know if you even heard me when I started talking, because I said this is always the hardest part in these sessions, to interrupt everyone, because there's so much you guys want to share. Good news is we're right before lunch, so you can continue the conversation after. But yeah, just want to real quick, I mean, obviously, I know you were not able to come up with an entire learner persona, but what I would love to hear, just a couple of voices in the room, what did that feel like, just thinking through the learner persona? Just some comments from the tables would be great.
Yeah, for us, it was more about firstly defining what collaboration actually means.
Oh, interesting, absolutely, yeah.
Because we were talking about a train driver, and imagine him collaborating while at the job, so you see it in the newspapers next day.
Yes, that would not be a good idea, yes.
What we discussed was more about what he does after his work, best practices, lessons learned.
Yeah.
So it's also very important that we don't stereotype people. That you are a knowledge worker sitting behind a desk and you need to be very collaborative. You could be on the road, you could be driving a plane, so there are so many instances. And I think that's where we started off, is by defining what collaboration actually means and adding a value to that.
I love that. And that's why I was saying, this is the starting point, and you might not even know where you actually then go from there, and you still have a conversation you wouldn't have otherwise, right? Thank you very much. Who else? Yes?
I think it's interesting because it takes you very quickly away from the content.
Yes.
So we started to have a discussion about training for leaders.
Yes.
And actually that in some leadership positions there's a reluctance to admit that you don't know things, and there's a reluctance to feel in a safe place to discuss whatever is being discussed. So that if we get straight into your learning design, having to somehow get over that hurdle. Whereas perhaps you might otherwise have gone down the route of just doing the basic knowledge and missing the fact that they might not get that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really, really good point. Usually what we do, and I don't know if it is because we don't have enough time or enough resources, we jump to the content straight away instead of thinking about the person behind the content. Love it. One more? Yes?
I'm thinking a lot about how we privately learn against companies. And privately we go to Google, we search, we go to YouTube, we learn on Facebook, LinkedIn, and we have this kind of new way to do stuff. When we come to companies, we we have a learning plan, you must do this. It's a very old-fashioned way. So the persona we actually privately today, it's totally different when you come into organization.
Mm-hmm.
And I think organizations need to adapt today this private way how we learn, or want to learn. Of course, you need the formal things you need to, but the other ways, because the speed is so fast today, and we can't provide all learning we need all the time.
Yeah.
We need to have a growth mindset. You need to take your own responsibility for your learnability. So you need to create that environment, that kind of, to just reflect how you are in basically your normal life.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, thank you for that. And I think that's extremely important. I actually attended a conference 2 weeks ago in Germany, Learn Tech in Karlsruhe. And I was part of Jane Hart's session, and she actually made us think of our daily learning habits and how much you learn in a week. And initially I'm like, oh, that's actually not that much, because right away my mind went to the formal learning piece, right? But if you actually sit down and really think about how much you learn every day on Twitter and LinkedIn and all of that stuff, you're like, whoa, I had no idea I learned that much every week. And to your point there, how can we bring that into our organizations? And I think starting with learner personas really gives us that different point of view of like, oh, what they're actually doing outside of work. Look, beautiful, love it. I'd love to hear more, but kind of gotta move on. But I'm here until Friday morning, so happy to have conversations after as well. Okay, so now we kind of touched a little bit on that. It's almost like I put her there with her answer. We're going to talk about learner journeys. So now that we know the different learner personas that we have, again, ideally you have 3 to 5 to make sure it's manageable and you really have a good grasp on who they are. You now want to think about what are the different touch points, what are the different milestones someone is going through, right? And that's where really, the collaboration piece in this case, we have to take a closer look at like, okay, what could that look like? Where do I want to build that in? Do I want to build it into an onboarding? Do I build it into, an upskill? What does that look like? But in the end, it's all about the experience. And as I said, it does start with the learner, but it also then continues with data, right? Because we really got to make sure we combine the two. And this is from Lori Niles Hoffman's ebook on data-driven design. So she says, we don't just have to look at, seat time, because that doesn't really tell me anything at all. But look at stats that are more related on engagement. Right? Because in the end, that's really how we get through to the learner. Because that engagement piece and that relevance piece, that is how we really make them understand how they can make a difference to our organizations, right? So yeah, looking at downloads, yes, I know if you download something, it doesn't mean you read it after we all done it, right? But at least in that moment of time, there was some type of an engagement because they did download it, right? Drop-off, so when you're looking at videos, where did they actually drop off? That's a good one. How many times was something shared or liked? You can look at trends overall. One I like a lot also is mobile versus desktop. Tells you a lot on when you think about your learner persona again. Are they more on their phones, or are they actually on their desktops? Makes a difference on what kind of learning you create. And time of day, I love that one a lot, because you actually have that in your LMS. It's just a timestamp when people go in and look at stuff. But it shows you when people are actually most engaged in your learning, because now they have time to look at it. A salesperson, I would say, typically you see that they go in after hours because they got to be on the phones all day. Whereas, if you look at someone in marketing and admin, it's probably during business hours. Use that to your advantage. Leverage that time of day, right? But yeah, we talked about it. We're still order takers for a lot of different reasons. We could talk about this all day. I'm not going to. Again, I talked about this in the beginning. We're looking at right now training as that, or learning as that one-time thing. But it's not. So even if you're tasked by a client internally to do like let's just say a 15-minute e-learning module, you can still look at this as a journey. You could have, take some content out of that and put it into a teaser video. And then you actually have a quick infographic that sets the stage for then the actual e-learning module or a video or whatnot. And then after you follow up with, just an email. I don't know. It doesn't have to be that same kind of structure all the time. So even if it's a smaller program, what could the journey look like? It becomes much easier if you have more content pieces to create a journey, absolutely, right? But by the way, when clients come to me and say, I need a 15-minute e-learning module, I'm like, okay, I have 2 questions for you. Why 15 minutes and why e-learning, right? But we kind of tend to go to that medium. And I'm not saying it's the wrong medium all the time, but there's other ways. And again, think about the journey itself. So what's the right experience? How can I and upskill them in a timely fashion? That's where I like to think of, or first off, actually, we see this a lot. Beginning of a journey, everyone is super excited. The end of the journey, maybe not so much, right? So how can we get that relevance piece through? How can we get that engagement piece through the entire journey? And that is where I like to look at the marketing funnel. You don't have to be marketers. I give you a quick overview. There's also different funnels out there. Some of them are 3 stages. Some of them have 55. I don't even know. But this one is pretty simple. You start on top with the awareness, which really means you're being educated about a product or a service. And you've all been there, right? When you're looking for a new product or a service, what do? Exactly, you Google it, right? That's just what we do. And then we click on the first link on top, and then we might click on the second, and maybe on the third, and that's probably it, right? But now what you're doing is you're educating yourself about 3 different organizations that offer the same product or service. And the company knows that because they just put content on the website that's so high level that you get a good idea of what it's all about, but it's not so detailed that you're like, whoa, totally turned off because you don't want to go any further. They're educating you. They know exactly where you are in this funnel and what kind of content you need in that moment. Then they move on to the consideration phase. That is where you're really like, okay, I looked at these. Let's just say you looked at 5. Now you're going to narrow it down to 2. Now you start comparing 2 companies. That is where you need a little bit more information. Now you need some tech specs, or now you want to read some testimonials because you really want to know about the service. That content changes now because you already know about the organization. You're already aware of it. You have specific questions that need answering. So you get different content. Usually what also happens between, and either there or once you go to closer to the conversion phase, is that's where you put your credit card details down. It's where you sign your life away. But somewhere in this process, you usually enter your email address somewhere if you're online, right? That's how they get you. Because now they have all of your information, all of your digital body language, everything you've done online, and they can really cater towards your likes and your needs. It's all automated in the background, right? But they get it. They leverage that information to say, okay, based on what she did on this website, how much time they spend on something, what they clicked on in an email, I continue sending content that aligns to that. Once you're converted, they try to retain you, so that's the loyalty stage, and then you move on to advocacy, which means you are actually a brand advocate. You market for this organization. So that's kind of the steps that marketers are looking at. And we can leverage this in L&D as well. So what would that look like? I'm going to actually use the example of an onboarding because usually people are quite familiar or have touched an onboarding program at one time in their lives. The really important thing about an onboarding program is it doesn't start the day someone walks through your door. It starts the moment they sign a contract or maybe even before that. But we hardly think about that piece of the journey. And it comes back to that for us, we just think this way. We think about an event. We don't know what's happening before. We don't know what's happening after. We don't care. But we have to start thinking about the front and the back end. So for me, it starts when they signed a contract. So what could that look like? So awareness stage, top of the funnel, that's where you get their buy-in. The buy-in into your organization, the buy-in into your culture, the buy-in into the training and learning offerings that you have. You can drop content here already if you want to, but you don't have to. Just get them excited. Yes, they have to go through the onboarding program, we know that. But why not, again, make it a little bit more fun for them? So it could be as simple as you send out a short video a couple days ahead of time and just use your phone. It doesn't have to be high production. I don't want it to be high production. I want it to be, hey, new hire, here's your new desk. Here will be your desk mates. Here's the kitchen. That's where you can make the coffee. Be aware of the cappuccino. It's not good. Whatever, right? Here are some of your coworkers. Here is where the washrooms are. So you're actually already dropping content in this case, right? Because you would do like a tour of the facilities anyway. But now what you're doing, you're managing expectations, you take away some of the fear, you get them excited. If you think back to the learner persona, one of the questions was, what is it they see? You're just showing them what they will see once they come into your organization, right? Another option is, often now when you start in a new organization, you get some swag, you come to your desk, it's there, just send it ahead of time. Imagine their surprise if they get to the mailbox, it's like, whoop, who sent me a package? Didn't order anything on Amazon. Oh, it's my new company. That's pretty cool. All right, just some ideas. Consideration, that's really where they're like, okay, they're asking themselves, not do I want to buy this product, because you're nothing to sell, but you're selling yourself here, so do I want to take this training? Do I actually want to invest my time? Yes, you say some of this training is mandatory, so, right? But think back to the motivation. That's what you're really getting at here. Do I want to take this training? Do I really want to take it as a human being? I really want to learn. I want to get better. I want to reskill. I want to upskill. That motivation piece, that relevance piece. How do you get to that? So for me, I love to use testimonials from current staff. And nothing, again, don't make it too formal and too glossy because it won't work. Have a speed dating round, for example, on day one, where you have high performers in your organization come in, meet the new hires and say, hey, I've been with the organization for this long, and I've actually, went through all of our different training programs. Here's what I really liked. Didn't like this one, but it's kind of part of the job, so it is what it is. But this, they say it takes 2 hours. It actually only takes you half an hour, but right? So give them some insights, but then also show them, hey, if you take all these different options that we have for you, you actually are able to be a high performer in this organization. And that motivates people. People want to do well, right? The other option is to actually just say, and we had it over here, right, where we said, talk openly about other resources that are out there. They're going to do it anyway. They're going to go on YouTube and Google stuff. Why not let them or communicate to them that it's okay to do that? Because there's so much content out there that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's already there. If it's company specific, yes, you might have to start adjusting a little bit and build it yourself. But if it's basic general stuff, collaborating with one another, it's one of those soft skills, power skills, whatever you want to call it. There's a lot of stuff already out there off the shelf. Start with that, and then leverage some of this content and then personalize it to your own organization, right? But you don't have to reinvent the wheel. So show them that there's other stuff out there. Then we go into the conversion phase, where you put your credit card down. In L&D, for me, this is really where the real training, the real learning happens, and where you make them true believers. Because if you think about the onboarding, you don't want them to just take this training and then be like, okay, next. This is where you plant the seed. This is where you get them excited for the rest of their lives with you, to be excited about training, to be excited about learning, to be excited about the offerings that you have. And it could be as simple as, again, using data points where you can to really kind of see what works for them, where can I personalize, where can I adjust. But the easiest one for me is actually to add reflection time. I like to call it white space. So when I create an onboarding program, what I would do at the end of the day, I actually give them an hour of white space. And I say, okay, in this hour, you can either go to one of the people you met today and ask them more questions. Obviously, you have to make sure they're available. You can just read up on something that we talked about today. You can watch the video again, whatever it is. Oh, you say you just want to go home because you had enough? That's okay, right? They're people, they're human beings. I feel like sometimes we forget about that. And sometimes it's just really overwhelming. But you'll be surprised. I've never had anyone actually go home because they usually like that openness. They like to then share and reflect with other people in the organization, with their peers. They're eager, right? So add that in. And then allow learners to pick and choose content. And we do it, I've done it before, I'm sure we've all done it before, where we're like, okay, here's everything you need to take, no matter if you know it or not. You know all this stuff already? Well, I still want you to sit through like 3 hours of learning, right? way to motivate your employees. So let's try to think of ways that we can really allow them to pick and choose. Do some pre-testing. If they can pass the exam, why have them sit through all your content, right? Really think about that. And I know we talk about this, but we don't do it. I don't know why. I don't understand. But yeah, those can be some really, really simple tactics, right, to get learners to convert, basically. Now you might say, okay, especially if we talk a little bit about have learners pick and choose content, create personalized options, how can I get there? So marketers use something that's called dynamic content. What that is so in emails, and you all get all these emails from different organizations. First off, they already know your name. Well, of course, you put it into a form, right? So they have that information. But even if we all were signed up for the same newsletter or the same email from an organization, we would probably get different emails just because we are different people. We have different information in our profiles. So what marketing does is, for example, based on your city that you're living in, you will get different content. So for learning and development, what we could do is, if someone is in a different job role, I can give them different content, because someone in sales is probably much more interested in competitors, and I have an example later on, than someone in an admin position. So I can say, if this, then that. So if they are in sales, then send them this content. If they are in marketing, then send them that content. Yes, you have to create the email once for all the different departments, but then you let the automation piece do its magic. So you don't have to go out and create 10 different programs. You just have to adjust them slightly in your messaging, in your copy, where they link to, and that is where the learner personas come in again, and you link it to the dynamic content piece. For the loyalty and advocacy stage, remember at the bottom of the funnel there, that is where, for me, performance support sits, where you really continue to build the relationship with your learners. That's really what it is. We talk about building relationship with customers. We hardly talk about building relationships with our learners, but it's so important to do that. So yeah, give them options for performance support, infographics, chatbots, videos, whatever it is. And the other thing that I find extremely helpful is just having role models and mentors that really, take them by their hand and walk them through the experience in your organization. And then, once you've done all of that fun stuff, usually you would have like a big wall, right? And you have your Post-its, and you really think about what are those touch points that someone would go through in that journey? What does that look like? And you can even use different color Post-its and say, okay, this is what it is right now. Then new color is, this is what it should be. And third color could be art of possible, right? Where can I push myself? Where can I have some crazy ideas that right now might be really crazy, but in a year from now, might actually be quite possible. And then, you kind of start adding a column in your skill matrix for the journey. So TP just stands for touch point, okay? All right, so what I want you to do, back into your table groups, continue kind of the conversation that you started around that persona, and now think about what would a journey look like. So over here, we already know it's a conductor probably on a train, so probably very different than over here where it was more in a leadership position. But take about, again, 2 to 3 minutes to think about what that journey could look like or how you could go about planning that journey. Sounds good? All right. Oh, it sounds like it's going to work faster than the last time. It's awesome. Okay, so would love to hear 2 or 3 ideas and things you talked about. Didn't work as well after all. All right. Would like to hear 2 or 3 ideas that you talked about at your table groups. Who wants to go? 2 or 3 ideas. Someone over there? Yes.
We were talking about 2 things. One was, helping them identify the network that they need to collaborate with, because finding the right people, do I want to get better, or am I trying to innovate or solve a problem, but helping build the right people to collaborate with. People can't collaborate if they don't know who to collaborate with, so thinking about that before.
Yeah. I love that. So just to think about the people they should collaborate with, right? It's really important. Excellent. Another one. Yes, thank you.
So we were thinking about where you've got say Salesforces, that it's easy if they're all located in the same place to pull them together, but when they're dispersed across the country or different countries, about new methodology then that you'll be using to spark that motivation, that excitement. But then also using some of your other sensors as well to continue that. So yes, emails and e-learning will be your standard go-tos, but actually what if some of your digital content can be delivered via physical mails, so you again get that excitement that you've got a parcel or something there for you. You open it up and it's got QR codes or things like that you can then put straight onto your phone, and you've got that, you've then got your preferred.
I love that. I might steal that. So if you have a diverse workforce, right, how do you get them together? But then, just instead of doing it all digitally, send them something in the mail, has a QR code in it, and then, they open up that QR code and whatever is behind there. I love that. Great. Great. One more? Anyone? Yes.
We were looking, for us, still continuing the kind of train driver idea, we were looking at around what existing one-way communication platforms have we got in place that we could flip to be a kind of two-way network or some sort of peer network. Because we came up with the difficulty of people might start their event, work event at the same location, but end at different times and at different locations. So how can we flip what might be a compliance system or make sure you do routines to a more kind of comms platform where people talk and share problems they found that we had?
I like that, a comms platform for diverse people as well in the end and times. Excellent, thank you very much. I love that. Great. All right, so next, we have our learner persona or personas. We have a better idea of what their journey and the milestones look like. Now we have to map the content to that, right? And when it comes to content, we often don't know what we have available to us. We go into our LMSs or content management systems, we're like, whoa, what's all of this, right? There's a lot of stuff up there, and it's really, really challenging to kind of cut through that noise, right? So when it comes to content strategy, if you want a definition, I get often asked, so it's the creation and the publication and the governance of useful and usable content. I know, it's a mouthful. So what does that actually really mean in plain English? It's really all of your written content, it's all of your images, it's all of your multimedia. And often when we think of content, I talked about at the beginning of the session, if you remember, we think content is the same as training or training offers, but it's not, right? Content is all of this. And marketing looks at content as a business asset. Makes sense. Imagine all the time you spend on writing, on creating images, on creating videos, GIFs, whatever it is, right? There's a lot of work that goes into that, a lot of resources, a lot of money. For me, I like to think of a content strategy as an inventory in a grocery store. Like imagine you go to a grocery store, right? And you pull something off the shelf, you pay for it, and right away they know something has been sold. They either have to go back to the back room and refill, or, oh, we're out of it, we have to reorder it. So for me, content that we own in our organizations is exactly that. It's an inventory of what you have. Problem is, if you don't know what you have, how can you actually properly support your learners? So it's all about creating meaningful content, engaging content, and that engagement piece again comes back to the relevancy. So what's relevant to my learner? How can I get them motivated? What do they think? What do they feel? And sustainable, right? You can't go out there and create content over and over and over and over. Like we don't have time, we don't have money to do that. And in the end, it's all about the right content at the right time for the right audience at the right place. If you think back to the funnel we talked about, you get different content pieces depending on where you are in that journey. And we have to start doing the same thing with our learners. Depending on where they are, they need different pieces of content. It also helps you determine what content, as I just said, exists, but it also helps you understand what should be created and really why should it be created. Because now if you start looking at, oh, I actually already have something over here, so why do I actually go out and create it? Because it's already there and I didn't even know. I also know this is almost an impossible task to go backwards and say, okay, let's just sit down because I don't have anything else to do, and write down all the content I have. I get that. So if anything, start moving forward as you create new training solutions and learning solutions to say, okay, what are the content pieces that are going in there? And it can be a simple, Excel spreadsheet, although I would be careful with Excel because you usually collaborate. So use something like Google Sheets or something like Asana or Trello where you can really collaborate, because otherwise you end up in version control hell, right? And it doesn't really help you. But yeah, it's really, that's that one source of truth. And it also really helps you understand as you start looking at content, when you look at the data behind it, what's actually in use. I bet you all of you in this room have content on their LMSs that hasn't been touched in like 10 years. And it's still on the LMS. Well, newsflash, no one is going to use it in the next 10 years, so you might as well get rid of it. And if you feel bad about getting rid of stuff, just put it into a parallel universe, or I don't care where you put it, but just get rid of the clutter, right? It'll make your life easier. It'll make your learner's life easier as well. So when you do a content strategy, it's very similar. I don't want to go into too much detail, also because we're almost out of time. But the steps are really, you kind of analyze on, what is it that I'm dealing with? Is it actually a training problem, a learning problem? Or is it something that, could just be done in an email communication, right? Very simple. But then you kind of go in and really strategize and plan. And I mean, this is where the heavy lifting really starts, right? This is where you really create that plan. Again, you would have things like the name of the content piece. It could be which course it belongs to, the objectives, who owns it, extremely important. When do you need to maintain it? That's another thing we hardly think about. We just create, next, create, next, create. Oh, it's tiring, right? But we don't really think about when to maintain. The other really, really important thing is you need to add some tagging, because learners need to be able to search for content and also find it. Well, you only find it if it's tagged properly, right? So make sure you have that as well. And then once you're there and you kind of have that overview of like what you have, what you need, then you can create, curate, or collaborate. And again, if it's basic, generic stuff, buy it off the shelf, right? And then you can also just collaborate or borrow from someone else to kind of say, you know what, marketing has something over there I can use, like repurpose stuff, right? And then you'll be surprised that there's actually much less content that you'll have to create from scratch if you start looking around of what's already out there. And I know for some reason we have this feeling that, if it's been created outside of our organization, it's no good. Just let go of that. We're all good at what we're doing, right? So let's start curating and leveraging what's out there. Then you deliver, publish, share. What I mean by that, a lot of times people say, well, what do you mean by deliver? It's on the LMS. Yes, but think outside the LMS box. Does it really have to be on the LMS? Maybe not. Does it need to be tracked? Because if it doesn't need to be tracked, it doesn't need to be on the LMS. Just saying. Measure what you're doing, and then maintain, expire, destroy. Again, it's okay to destroy content, okay? Don't feel bad about that. All right, so you go back to your matrix, and then you kind of map that content, right? Now you know the learner persona, you know the skills, you know the learner persona, you know the touch points they have at the journey, what content fits there. Do you have content? Maybe you don't have content, right? But it helps you identify that. I'm not going to have you work in your groups just because we only have 10 minutes left, a little bit more than 10. So I'll just skip that to make sure we can kind of finish up with the multi-touch point blended solutions, which brings all of this together. Before I do that, any questions? Just want to make sure I give you a chance to also ask questions, of course. All right. So now we talked about the learner persona. We have the journey. We mapped the content. And now we have all this great stuff. How do we get it to the learner? And especially, how do we personalize, or how can we get those personalized options out there? Because I don't have the time to go to everyone and give them something, in person. So what you can do is you can leverage campaigns. Marketing has been using campaigns for ages and ages. The way I talk about it today is more with the idea of using emails. but a campaign can also be social media, it can be snail mail, it can be word of mouth marketing, it can be a mix of all of these, right? But a campaign is always something that's time or action triggered. So meaning either you push something out at a certain time of day or week, or after you've done something. So if you're on the internet and you're submitting a form and you hit submit, then you usually get an email after. So that would be the action, right? There's also always a call to action. Marketers are really good with that. If you look at all the emails you get, there's always something they want you to do. Either watch a video or click on something, right? Our call to actions, close the e-learning module in the top right corner. You just had them. You just had their attention, and you threw it out the window. You got to remember your target audience when you create your campaigns. We talked about learner personas a lot already, but where are they? And tofu, mifu, and bofu are not food types. They are top of the funnel, middle of the funnel, and bottom of the funnel. So where are they in their journey? Because they need different content pieces there. So when you create your campaign, most of the time you've done the work before already, but just keep that in mind, right? You want to engage through multiple touch points. So ideally, don't just give them 10 e-learning modules or 10 videos. Like mix it up, make it exciting for them. And then decide on that content flow and the different access points they would have. So here's an example of what I've done in the past with an organization. So this was a part of an onboarding program, and it was a competitor training. And initially, it was an hour session. Everyone is in the same room. Here are our 6 competitors. That's it. So it wasn't enough for salespeople, because obviously when they're on the phone, they're like, getting all these questions, and they couldn't answer them. And people in an admin position or in marketing, they're kind of like, yeah, it's great to know. It's been an hour of my life. It's okay. But still. So I'm like, okay, how can we actually make this a little bit more exciting and personal? So it started with a kickoff session, which was about 20 minutes long, to just say, here are the 6 competitors that we have. And over the next 6 weeks, you're going to receive emails with additional information on these competitors. And we also built in a chatbot on top of that. So first week, we sent out email number 1. Email number 1 had a link out to a white paper from that particular competitor. But the email looked different, depending on if you were in sales, or if you're in marketing, or in admin, or customer support, because we understood that you need different information based on the role you have. So the email for marketing and admin was like rather short and to the point, and it probably took them a minute to scan it, and it was good. Whereas for sales, there was additional links and additional information because they needed it. And they read it, and they just took it all in. The beauty with email marketing automation tools is it actually shows you if someone opened an email, and if they clicked on links within that email, you get all these metrics, which is fantastic. So if the email wasn't opened, we sent them a reminder email 2 days after. Different subject line, same content, right? If they opened the email, they received email number 2 in week number 2. Did all people open those emails? No. Did we need manager support to nudge them? Yes, right? So you need manager buy-in to make this happen. So we went through the different weeks. So again, it was 6 weeks. The slide just wasn't long enough. But in week number 3, we started adding in a chatbot. The organization used Slack. So we used a chatbot called Obi. OBIE, it's a Canadian company, obi.ai. At the time they were free, unfortunately now they charge, but it's an amazing organization. And Obi answers what, how, and why questions. So it's machine learning. It connects to, for example, your Google Drive. Just be careful what you allow access, because otherwise it just pulls everything you can find on your Google Drive related to competitors in this case. And you can push and pull content. So learners can pull with those questions that I just mentioned, but we can also push content because there's another campaign engine behind that says, on Monday, push out this. The week after on Monday, push out that. And so they continued, and then at the end, after 6 weeks, we had a quick closing session, kind of bring it all together, right? We saw some really increased engagement stats around this. We saw reduced times for salespeople to be able to close sales on the phone because they were working in the flow of work. They could ask Obi questions while they're on the phone with the client. And yes, they might have still put them on hold for a couple of seconds, but not minutes at a time in order to find someone who can answer a question because Obi was right there to do that. So It took about 3 to 4 weeks to set this up, leveraging the email marketing automation tool that was already in place. Again, at the time, Obi was free, so this didn't cost anything apart from the time to create it. Okay. And you can choose from all of these when you create your campaigns. And we forget about all the beautiful options that we have available to ourselves. And this is probably not even a complete list, but it really shows you, on-the-job, social, formal, emerging innovations. So, try to tap into as many of these as possible. And as we talk about, reskilling here as well, really, really important that, if you have a massive skill gap and there is a high degree of change, you've got to focus on that face-to-face training. It can be virtual too, it'll still do the trick, but don't let them hanging with digital stuff if the messaging around skill gap and high degree of change is that important, right? So be very, very careful. But yeah, lots and lots to choose from. And then you go back to your matrix, right? And you really kind of see, okay, what's the channel I want to use for the different roles, for the different skills? And then from there, you can prioritize on what's most important. And each prioritization will be different depending on if you have content, if that's what you need to focus on first, if there's a skill gap that you need to focus on first. So it kind of, will change based on your needs. Again, I do understand that the Excel idea, the table idea is quite simplified, but I think it really helps you start thinking differently and kind of like, okay, what does that look like? How can I actually do this? There's actually there's different softwares out there. One I found is called Skillspace. I just started playing around with it. I'm not affiliated in any way, but I found it a quite easy product to use, where you can actually, list the skills that you have in your organization. You can put the skills in yourselves. There's self-assessments for learners that they can fill in, so you can kind of see, where they meet or where they don't meet. So I thought it was quite interesting. You get a bit of a dashboard that really shows you where you are at. As the manager, you can see where your team is at. So it's just kind of a nice, visual representation of what that could look like. Just maybe a better way than using an Excel spreadsheet, right? Doesn't necessarily allow you to put in those touch points and the learner journey and the content mapping, but if you're just looking at that initial skills capturing, there's a lot of different tools out there. So those are just a couple of screenshots. So I talked a lot. My apologies. I was actually hoping to do a little bit more of the interactions here as well. And I was saying to Teresa, I can talk about this stuff for hours, clearly. So we talked about, the predictive, the proactive, and the personal approach when you think about re- and upskilling your workforce. So use data to predict what learners really need. That's your starting point. That doesn't mean you should never, ever look at data again. It kind of goes through, but that's just where you start. And then you go into, that learner experience. Who's your learner persona? What's that journey like? What do they go through? And then, you map the content accordingly. And then you become quite personal when you put it all together in that training design, when you put it together into a campaign. So we still have a couple of minutes. I also have an ebook if you want to download that. It's free, so you can just go to my website and do that. And it basically, summarizes all of the things we talked about, a couple additional examples, a couple of additional ideas out there. But yeah, we still have 3-4 minutes left. Are there any questions that you have or comments? Anything that was quite, yes, over here.
Maybe you wanted to go back to the first part on the personas.
Yeah, the persona, sure.
Because I've done the exercise before, and one of the challenges is, actually filling up all of the columns, but then moving from that to how does that inform what decision we're going to take?
Yeah.
Given this?
Yeah, so the question was, and I've seen this happen before too. You go through the exercise of creating a learner persona, and it's like, yay, we did it, and then you just go back to your old ways, right? So how do you actually carry that through? It's quite challenging, it certainly is. One way of making sure you do not forget about them is really print them out and put them on walls. What I've seen a lot is that you really start using their names when you work with them, because all of a sudden, so be careful, by the way, which name you pick, because they're going to stick, right? So really make them front and center, and be that person that when you are, brainstorming solutions to, when someone says, oh, the learner, just the learner, and you start using their name. So I think that's just a great way of doing that. And it's constantly back-checking. Every time you come up with a new solution, you then pause and say, okay, does this relate to the learner persona we came up with? Also, what I would highly recommend is really bringing in the learners, right? So even once you've mapped out that journey, yes, you already checked in with them at the learner persona level, do you see yourself in this? But once you created that solution for them, or ideated on it, so before you actually go in and put the dollars down to develop stuff, have them come in again and say, hey, does this work for you, right? But it's extremely important to just remind yourself, because I've been on projects where they were created and later on they were nowhere to be seen, right? It's extremely easy to do that. So yes, just put them top of mind. Any other questions or comments? Yes?
In this learner's journey,
yeah.
How do you categorize this learner's behavior of different age groups, gender, bias? Because they do have different ways, styles of learning sort of thing. But you can't centralize a learner's journey as create a profile that this is the way you should learn it.
Yeah.
Right? There is a different way you learn it, there is a different way I learn it.
Exactly.
But you are categorizing it as a single framework that name it, do it.
Yeah, so in the end, when you do the learner persona, will you be able to capture them all the people in the world in your organization? You won't, right? But you find a good average that makes people happy enough and much happier than they were when you were not even thinking about learner personas. And then from there, you only start thinking about their journey. Don't start thinking about the journey before you do the learner persona. So it's really important to think about them first. And to your point, they do learn differently, but that's why you go through that empathize stage and really understand who they are. And you'll be surprised, because the more time you spend creating them, you really start internalizing them and you start thinking like them, and you'll see it in your solution. But to your point, you have to make sure you go back and check on your work, right?
Is there a different way to market them for different groups out there?
What do you mean a different way to market them?
For example, when we categorize them based on their age or...
Yeah. So yeah, you could use age, it could be... It could be gender. It really depends. I think it's also a cultural thing, right? Absolutely. It could be geographic regions. So yeah, that really depends on your organization, how you want to break that out and what that profile looks like, right? So it's really different from organization to organization. Yeah, you're very welcome. So I think we're out of time, but I am around, as I said. Thank you very much for joining this session. It was a pleasure. I hope you continue the conversation. There's also a session in here after over lunch. So if you want to learn a little bit more around, choosing the right partner for you to work with, Amanda Nolan and her partner, I forgot her name right now. Thank you, Helen. They will actually talk about that, so don't run away to lunch right away. But again, thank you very much, and hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Take care.